I knew something was wrong the moment I stepped onto her porch. It wasn't anything dramatic, no broken window, no shouting, just a stillness that felt too controlled, too intentional. I stood there with a small Father's Day gift in my hand. Something I had chosen carefully, something I thought might remind her of better times. But even before I knocked, I felt that familiar tightness in my chest. The one that comes when you already know the answer, but you're hoping, begging, that you're wrong. Her car was in the driveway. I recognized the old scratch on the back door where she once misjudged the turning radius. Lights were on inside, though dim. I knocked gently at first, then a little louder. I didn't want to appear needy or desperate. I just wanted my daughter to open the door and say, "Happy Father's Day, Dad," the way she used to. But the door stayed closed. I tried again, calling out her name softly. I didn't want the neighbors to hear me. I didn't want the humiliation of looking like a lost old man standing on a porch that didn't welcome him anymore. Then I heard it. Movement inside. A quick shuffle, the sound of someone pausing mid-step. Not loud enough to be normal walking, quiet enough to mean hiding. I froze and listened. Someone whispered. Something brushed against the floor. I wasn't imagining it. They were inside. They just didn't want to face me. The shock didn't hit all at once. It seeped in slowly, like cold water rising around my ankles. I stood there, trying to understand how the same child who once ran into my arms every Father's Day now wouldn't even give me a single word. A memory flashed, not a full scene, just a feeling. Her small hand wrapped around my finger as she walked beside me years ago, her voice bright as she told me she made a card all by myself. She used to beam at me on this day. Now she hid behind a door. "Sweetheart," I said quietly, "I just wanted to see you for a moment." No answer. The silence pressed against me. It wasn't peaceful or gentle. It was deliberate, heavy, and sharp. The kind of silence that comes when someone has already made up their mind about you. I noticed something else then, something small but wrong. The locks looked different, newer, stronger, not the standard ones the house had when she first moved in. Someone had upgraded them. Someone wanted control over who could enter and who couldn't. I stepped back a little, trying to make sense of it. That's when I heard another voice inside. Unfamiliar. A man's tone, low and irritated. I couldn't make out the words, but I recognized the rhythm. The rhythm of someone telling her to stay quiet, to let me leave on my own. I felt something sink inside me. Not anger, not yet. Something closer to confusion, grief, and the first traces of fear. Fear not for my safety, but for hers. And for the relationship that seemed to be disappearing faster than I could understand it. I waited a little longer, maybe 5 minutes, maybe 10. Time felt strange. Eventually, I realized no one was coming to that door. No greeting, no explanation. Just a father standing on the wrong side of a barrier he never expected his own child to build. I turned away slowly, holding the unopened gift at my side. I didn't want to leave it on the doorstep. I didn't want it sitting there like a reminder of how unwanted I had become. Walking back to my car, I felt the weight of something deeper than a single ignored knock. This wasn't about Father's Day. This was a sign, a painful, undeniable sign, that something in her life, or someone in her life, had changed her toward me in a way I could no longer deny. If your own child left you standing outside their door like that, what would you have done? The last time she let me into her life feels like a moment from a different world. close enough to remember clearly, far enough to feel like it belonged to someone else's story. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon, months before Father's Day. She called me out of the blue, her voice soft, almost warm, asking if I wanted to come over for dinner. I remember how my chest lifted at the sound of her invitation. It felt simple. It felt familiar. It felt like she was still my little girl. That night, she laughed at my old stories, asked me about my health, even packed leftovers for me to take home. I didn't know then it would be the last normal moment we'd share. If I had, I might have paid more attention. I might have memorized the way her smile looked before it disappeared. Everything changed when she met him. She introduced him to me at a small family gathering. I could tell he was trying to make a good impression. But something in his eyes felt calculating, like he was scanning the room, deciding what he could take from it. He shook my hand firmly, too firmly, and spoke in a way that made every sentence sound like a lesson he thought I needed to hear. After that day, her calls became shorter. Her messages are less frequent. I'd text her something simple. "How are you feeling today?" And she'd reply hours later with one-word answers. If I called, sometimes he would answer instead, saying, "She's busy," even when I could hear music or the television behind him. The shift wasn't sudden. It crept in slowly, like a draft you don't notice until you're shivering. She stopped telling me about her job, her plans, the small details of her day. When I asked about things she used to share freely, she brushed me off or changed the subject. Once, when I pressed gently, she sighed and said, "Dad, I don't have time for long conversations anymore." The words weren't harsh, but the way she said them felt like a door quietly closing. Plans we made were canceled last minute. Something came up. "We're tired. Maybe next week." Each excuse chipped away at the closeness we once had. I tried not to take it personally. I told myself she was building a life, that young people get busy, that it was normal. But deep down, I felt the distance widening like a crack spreading across glass. One evening, I stopped by her place unannounced with a bag of groceries, something I used to do all the time. She opened the door only halfway and stepped outside like she didn't want me to see inside. She thanked me, but didn't invite me in. Her tone was tight, her eyes restless. I knew she wasn't alone. I knew he was just out of sight. When I asked if everything was okay, she snapped, "I said I'm fine," then forced a smile that never reached her eyes. That was the first time I walked away feeling like a guest instead of a father. Over the next months, the little signs added up. She started parroting phrases that didn't sound like her, things about boundaries and emotional space, spoken with a bluntness that felt rehearsed. She stopped asking me for advice, stopped seeking comfort, stopped showing any trace of the girl who once trusted me with everything. It became obvious that someone was reshaping her world, and I was being pushed out of it piece by piece. By the time Father's Day arrived, the pattern was already set. I was no longer part of her daily life. I was a visitor she avoided, a responsibility she didn't want, a reminder of something or someone she was trying to move away from. And standing on that porch, hearing movement behind a locked door, I finally understood that the emotional distance hadn't been random. It had been guided. Have you ever felt your child being pulled away from you by someone else? I kept trying to reach her long before Father's Day. It wasn't like I suddenly showed up at her door without warning. I had been trying to hold on to whatever was left of our relationship for months. I sent her small messages, simple ones, the kind a father sends when he wants to stay connected without intruding. Good morning. Hope you're okay. No pressure, just checking in. Miss you. Most of them were left on delivered. Some never showed the second check mark. The silence that followed each one felt heavier every time. It wasn't just lack of response, it was a choice not to respond. After a while, even typing the words felt like pressing my hand against a locked door. Every now and then, she sent back a reply. Short ones. Flat. Cold. Busy. Fine. Later. No warmth, no questions, no real conversation. Just enough to make it seem like she hadn't completely cut me off, but not enough to make me feel wanted. I used to save her longer messages from years ago, little things she'd written that made me smile. Now, her replies looked like they could have been copied and pasted from a stranger. Once, when I called her, he answered. She's out. His tone was clipped, impatient, like he had better things to do. I could hear faint laughter in the background, hers, the kind that used to brighten my whole day. But when I asked if I could leave a message, he said, "She'll call you back if she wants to," then hung up. She never called back. I started noticing a pattern. When she needed something, money for a bill, help with a car repair, a last-minute favor, my phone rang. She spoke sweeter then, softer the way she used to. And I always helped. I always said yes. But once the need was met, the warmth vanished again. The calls disappeared. The distance returned. I didn't want to believe she was treating me like a resource instead of a father. But each little moment built on the last, and eventually even I couldn't ignore what was happening. There were times she told me she was out of town for work, but a neighbor mentioned he'd seen her car parked outside all weekend. Another time she claimed she was sick and needed rest, but her social media showed her at a restaurant with friends. The lies weren't big ones, not at first, but they came often enough that I stopped taking her words at face value. It wasn't the dishonesty that hurt most. It was the effort she put into creating distance. I could feel the shift in my body, too. I moved slower. My joints stiffened in the morning. Some days I forgot simple things, where I placed my keys, whether I had taken my pills. Aging crept into my life quietly, reminding me that time was no longer on my side. The silence from her made that reality sharper. When you get older, you don't just want your children's attention, you need their presence, their concern, their care. But she wasn't there, not even in small ways. Every ignored message, every short reply, every lie about where she was. It painted a picture I didn't want to look at. A picture of a daughter stepping away from me, not out of busyness or stress, but out of choice. And maybe not just her choice. Maybe someone else's influence pushing her further from me, piece by piece. Still, I kept trying. I kept reaching out. I kept hoping the next message would be the one she answered with her old voice, the one that still lived in my memories. But Father's Day proved what I had been too afraid to admit. The distance between us wasn't an accident. Have you ever felt invisible to someone you raised? I bought the gift a week before Father's Day. Nothing expensive, nothing flashy, just something that meant something to us. A framed photograph of the two of us from years ago, taken on a day when she had insisted on treating me to lunch with her first paycheck. She looked proud in that photo. I looked even prouder. I chose that picture because it reminded me of a time when she still wanted me in her life. I wrapped it carefully, smoothing each edge of the paper as if the act alone could hold the relationship together. I told myself she would appreciate it, that maybe, just maybe, it would melt whatever distance had grown between us. Even when my messages went unanswered that week, I clung to hope. Father's Day had always been our day. I believed it could still be. When I reached her house, her car was parked exactly where it always was. I could see blinds half open in the living room window. A pair of shoes sat on the porch that weren't hers. I stepped closer, feeling the same heaviness I felt last time, but forcing myself to push through it. I knocked gently, holding the gift to my chest. No answer. I waited, then knocked again. Still nothing. But I heard movement. Quick, quiet shuffling. A door closing deeper inside the house. Then a voice, low, unfamiliar, muttering something I couldn't make out. It didn't sound like a conversation. It sounded like someone was giving instructions. I called her name softly, trying not to let my voice break. "It's me. I just wanted to see you." Silence. Then another whisper. Not hers. His. The realization hit me slowly at first, then all at once. They were choosing not to open the door. They knew I was there. They knew why. And they were ignoring me on purpose. A car drove by, then slowed as it approached. A neighbor I didn't recognize glanced at me. His expression caught somewhere between pity and discomfort. I nodded as if everything was fine, as if I wasn't standing there like a man who had lost his place in his own child's life. The neighbor looked away quickly and kept driving. Humiliation burns differently when you're older. It settles deeper because you carry the weight of knowing how much you've given over the years. I stood there with that gift in my hand, feeling smaller than I ever had. I knocked one last time. It wasn't loud. It wasn't desperate. It was just the last attempt of a father who didn't want to give up. But when no answer came, not even a whisper, I felt something shift inside me. I walked back to my car slowly, my steps heavy, my chest tight. When I sat down, I placed the gift beside me on the seat. I stared at it for a long time, the wrapping paper reflecting a soft shimmer from the sun. It was supposed to be on her table by now. It was supposed to make her smile. Instead, it sat untouched, unwanted, a symbol of everything that had gone wrong. I asked myself the question I had tried so hard to avoid. Why was she hiding from me? What had changed so drastically that she couldn't even open a door? And deep down, I already knew the answer. This wasn't busyness. This wasn't stress. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was intentional. This was planned. This was someone else's influence tightening its grip. I held the gift again before setting it gently in the back seat. I didn't want to damage it. I didn't want to admit what it now represented. But the truth sat heavy in my chest. She didn't want me there. Would you keep knocking? Or walk away with the gift still in your hands? I waited a full day before calling her after Father's Day. I didn't want my voice to shake. I didn't want my words to come out sounding wounded, even though that's exactly how I felt. I rehearsed what I would say over and over, telling myself to stay calm, to stay steady, to give her the chance to explain. When she finally answered, her tone was flat, almost irritated. "What is it, Dad?" I swallowed hard. "I came by yesterday. I knocked. I know you were home. Why didn't you open the door?" A long pause followed, the kind that doesn't come from thinking, but from searching for the right excuse. "I didn't hear you. I was resting." It was a lie, and she said it with a softness that didn't belong to her. It felt borrowed, like someone had told her exactly what to say. "I heard movement inside," I replied quietly. "I heard voices." Her breath caught for a second. "You must have imagined it. We weren't doing anything, and I wasn't feeling well." Another lie. Gentle, practiced, distant. It didn't fit her natural rhythm. My daughter had always spoken directly, sometimes too directly. This new version of her spoke like she had to run every word through someone else first. Are you okay? I asked. You don't sound like yourself? A muffled voice came through the phone. Him. I couldn't hear each word, but I heard the tone, short, sharp, instructive. After a moment, she spoke again, almost as if she were reading from a script. I'm fine. You're overreacting. I don't know why you keep making everything a big deal. Her answer stung more than the ignore at the door. She had never spoken to me like that, not even as a teenager. The edge in her voice wasn't hers. It belonged to someone who wanted distance between us. I tried again, gentler this time. I'm not trying to cause trouble. I just want to understand what's going on. You haven't been yourself lately. You don't answer my messages. You canceled the last 3 plans we made. Is everything okay at home? There's nothing wrong at home, she said quickly. Too quickly. So I asked a simple question. How's work? Last time you told me you were working overtime. She hesitated. Yeah, still am. But I had seen pictures on social media, her out with friends, not a work badge in sight. The neighbor had also mentioned seeing her car home early most days. And the car repair? I continued. Did everything get fixed? Another pause. What car repair? She had asked me for money to handle it 2 weeks earlier. Now she didn't even seem to remember the story she'd told. The unease in my chest grew heavier. These weren't harmless mistakes. These were mismatched stories layered on top of each other like someone trying too hard to cover up the cracks. Then I asked, Are you sure you're okay financially? Anything you need to tell me? I didn't accuse her of anything. I didn't raise my voice. I simply asked. She snapped. Dad, stop questioning me. Everything is fine. Just leave it alone. In the background, I heard that same low voice, again, firmer this time. Her next words came out strangely smooth. I think we need space. You contact me too much. It's overwhelming. Space. That wasn't her word. That was his. Her tone held no emotion, no uncertainty. Just cold distance crafted by someone else. It wasn't just that she was hiding things. She was being guided to hide them. The call ended soon after, her excuse rushed and careless. I stared at my phone long after the line went silent, feeling something shift inside me. This wasn't about hurt feelings anymore. This wasn't about miscommunication. This was about control, secrecy, and a pattern I could no longer pretend wasn't there. For the first time, I realized I needed to look deeper into what was happening in her life and who was influencing it. When did you first notice a lie someone you loved told you? It was a quiet Wednesday morning when everything shifted from personal pain to something official. I was sitting at my kitchen table, nursing a cup of coffee that had gone cold before I even touched it. I hadn't been sleeping well. My thoughts kept pulling me back to that locked door, the whispers behind it, and the lies she fed me on the phone. Then my doorbell rang. It was my neighbor from across the street, Mrs. Halston, a woman who had watched my daughter grow up, who had handed out candy to her every Halloween. She stood there with a concerned look, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. Are you all right? She asked gently. I tried to reassure her, but she shook her head. I saw you on Father's Day, sitting in your car with that gift. You looked devastated. And I shouldn't say anything. But I've noticed things. People coming and going from her place at strange hours, arguments. Your daughter looking anxious when she leaves. I don't think everything is okay over there. Her words hit hard because they matched the unease that had been growing inside me. But hearing them from someone else someone with no reason to lie or exaggerate, made it feel real in a way I had been avoiding. Before I could fully process it, she added, "I mentioned my concerns to a friend who works in social services. She said someone should check on you, not just her." I stared at her, confused. Me? She said sometimes elders are targeted without realizing it. Financially, emotionally. She thinks you might be experiencing neglect or manipulation from family. The word neglect made my stomach twist. I'd carried the pain of her silence like a personal failure. But hearing someone else call it neglect turned that pain into fear. Later that afternoon, I received a call from the local police department. The officer's tone was steady, professional, but not cold. "Sir, we received a welfare referral regarding possible elder neglect or financial concerns involving you and your daughter. We'd like to ask you some questions. Would you be willing to come in?" I felt my hands tremble. Not from guilt, but from the shock of hearing my private heartbreak framed as a legal concern. Still, I agreed. At the station, an officer named Reyes guided me into a small interview room. He spoke with a calmness that made it easier to breathe. "We'd like you to walk us through what happened on Father's Day," he said. "Start from the moment you arrived at her house." So I did. I told him about the gift, the knocking, the whispers, the silence that felt prepared, not accidental. I explained how her partner's voice kept slipping into our conversations, how her answers sounded coached, how her stories contradicted themselves. As I spoke, the officer asked questions, clear ones, not leading, not exaggerated. "Has she asked you for money more often recently?" "Yes." "When she does she provide details?" "Not really." "Have you noticed changes in how she speaks to you?" "Completely." "Has her partner ever restricted your access to her?" "Yes." Each question connected the dots I had been too hurt to see. This wasn't simply a drifting relationship. This wasn't just emotional distance. This was a pattern. Officer Reyes pulled out a pamphlet, a simple one with large print, and placed it gently on the table. "This is information on elder financial and emotional exploitation. Some of what you're describing fits common warning signs." Seeing those words in writing, it shook me. My own daughter, my only child, possibly harming me in ways I never imagined. He continued, "We're not making accusations yet, but we need to document this. There may be a larger issue involving coercive control." Coercive control. The phrase felt heavy, dark, far beyond anything I had ever associated with her life. By the time I stepped out of the station, one truth had settled deep in my chest. This wasn't just hurt feelings anymore. This was abuse. Should authorities step in sooner when elders are being ignored or isolated? The day the truth finally came out, I walked into the courthouse feeling older than I ever had. My knees ached, my hands shook, and my heart felt like it was carrying the weight of every unanswered message, every lie, every door she refused to open. I wasn't there seeking revenge. I wasn't there to punish her. I was there because the truth had to be seen, not just by me, but by the people who could finally stop what had been happening behind closed doors. The courtroom was quiet, almost too quiet. My daughter sat on one side of the room, her partner beside her, whispering into her ear. She looked tense, defensive, her jaw tight. She still didn't look at me. When the proceedings began, the investigator presented the first piece of evidence. Months of unusual financial activity connected to my name. Credit inquiries I hadn't made, accounts I hadn't opened, charges I'd never seen. Every document had one thing in common: My daughter's partner had accessed or initiated them. The courtroom monitor displayed the records one by one. The way he had used my information to benefit their lifestyle. The way he had kept her close and me far away. The way he had quietly chipped away at my identity and turned my trust into an opportunity. The prosecutor spoke clearly, letting each detail land with force. This was a coordinated effort to isolate an elder from his primary support network, she said. The partner exerted controlling influence, causing the daughter to withdraw communication and deny access. This pattern is consistent with coercive behavior and financial exploitation. I watched my daughter's face. She didn't look shocked. She didn't cry. Instead, she looked almost annoyed, like the truth was an inconvenience rather than a betrayal. When asked to speak, she crossed her arms and said, "I didn't do anything. He's exaggerating. Dad always needs attention." Hearing her reduce everything to attention-seeking felt like being cut open. But it also clarified something I had struggled to admit. She no longer saw me as her father. She saw me as an obstacle, a burden, something standing in the way of her life with him. Then her partner spoke, trying to shift blame back onto me. "He gave permission. He probably forgot," he said. "He's old. His memory isn't great." The judge raised his hand sharply. "Enough." The room fell silent. The judge leaned forward, his expression stern. "What I see here is not forgetfulness. What I see is a father who was taken advantage of because he trusted his only child. And I see a partner who manipulated that trust for personal gain." He turned toward them. "This behavior is not only immoral, it is criminal." Hearing those words gave me a strange mix of relief and grief. Relief because someone in authority finally saw what I'd been living through. Grief because my daughter sat there unmoved, as if none of it mattered. The judge listed the charges: fraud, identity misuse, elder neglect, coercive behavior that led to intentional isolation. Each word felt like a nail sealing the truth into place. Her partner was taken into custody without hesitation. My daughter was given strict restrictions and ordered to participate in mandatory counseling while further charges were reviewed. The sentencing phase was scheduled, but the weight of the verdict was already clear. Justice was finally speaking for me. But it was speaking against my own child. When the hearing ended, people in the courtroom glanced at me with quiet sympathy. A few even nodded respectfully, the way people do when they want to acknowledge someone's pain, but aren't sure how to express it. For the first time, I felt seen, not as a burden, not as someone overreacting, but as a father who had been harmed. Walking out of that courtroom was bittersweet. I had my dignity back. But I had lost her long before the judge declared the truth. Do you think the punishment matched the harm done? I woke up early on Father's Day this year, long before the sun settled across the rooftops. The air was still, quiet in a way that felt different, lighter almost. There was no ache of waiting for a message that would never come, no pressure to pretend I didn't care. No heavy hope that she might suddenly remember who I used to be in her life. This time, I wasn't standing outside anyone's door. I wasn't holding a gift that would never be opened. I wasn't rehearsing words I'd never get to say. This time, I chose peace. Cutting ties with her hadn't been easy. There was no moment where it felt good. No moment where I celebrated the choice. It was slow, painful, and filled with long nights where memories circled me like ghosts. After her laughter as a child, the way she held my hand crossing the street, the pride in her eyes when she graduated. But each of those memories carried a shadow now. Every bit of good was tangled with the knowledge of what she had grown into and what she allowed to happen. I had spent a lifetime supporting her, Every milestone she reached had some piece of me behind it. My time, my savings, my sacrifices. And in the end, she used the trust I built as a tool to cut me away. Betrayal doesn't just bruise a heart, it reshapes it. You never forget the moment you realize someone you raised sees your love as something they can spend and throw away. And yet, as painful as it was, I knew staying connected to her would have meant staying connected to the abuse, the silence, the lies, the manipulation. Letting go wasn't abandoning her, it was saving myself. So I created a new routine, one that didn't depend on her. I started taking morning walks around the neighborhood, slow ones at first, then longer as my legs remembered their strength. I joined a community group at the library where elders shared stories, some of them far heavier than mine. There was comfort in knowing I wasn't alone, comfort in sitting with people who understood the quiet ache of being pushed aside by the very children they had poured their lives into. I learned new things too. I tried gardening with a neighbor, even though I had no natural talent for it. I volunteered at the community center once a week, helping other seniors navigate phone apps and online forums. And slowly, the empty corners of my life began to fill with new faces, new routines, new reasons to wake up and feel steady. Dignity became my compass. I realized I didn't have to explain my worth to anyone, not even my own daughter. Respect isn't something you earn through endless giving. Respect is something others choose to give. And when they don't, you have every right to walk away. Family ties don't excuse cruelty. They don't excuse neglect. They don't excuse exploitation. Love without boundaries turns into a cage, and I wasn't going to live in one anymore. When I stepped out onto my porch this Father's Day, the sunlight felt warm on my face. I didn't wait for a text that wouldn't come. I didn't check my phone at all. Instead, I made myself a good breakfast, turned on some quiet music, and spent the morning reading, something I hadn't done peacefully in years. Later, I walked to the park and sat on a bench under a tall oak tree. Children played in the distance. Families gathered around picnic tables. None of it made me envious. None of it made me sad. For the first time, I felt a different kind of fullness. The kind that comes when you choose yourself after a long lifetime of choosing everyone else. I didn't forgive her. I didn't forget. But I accepted the truth, and I built a future around it. What do you believe elders truly deserve at the end of their lives?